From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
When I heard this shell, I came inside the room to look. I can't recognize my daughters. Their heads were cut of their bodies.
Dr. Ezzedine Abdulaish, 3 of his daughters and a niece were killed when the Israeli military shelled his house near the end of its 3-week assault on Gaza. A well-known voice on Israeli television, his tragedy was broadcast live. Today, 2 months later, Democracy Now!'s Anjali Kamat visits the doctor in his home in Gaza. But first, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz reports on Israeli soldiers describing how they killed Palestinian civilians and destroyed their property. We'll speak with correspondent Amira Haas. And a protest is being held today outside the Federal Immigration Building in New York to stop the deportation of 30,000 Haitians living in the United States. We'll speak with author, activist, and Trans-Africa founder Randall Robinson. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The House has overwhelmingly approved a measure to recoup taxpayer money by imposing a 90% tax on bonuses paid to employees at the insurance giant AIG. The tax would also apply to any company receiving more than $5 billion in bailout funds. A Senate version would impose an even higher rate than the House's 90%. The vote came hours after AIG complied with a New York State subpoena and disclosed the names of employees who received bonuses. Public outrage over the AIG bonuses fueled the congressional response. On Thursday, demonstrators gathered outside AIG's offices in Washington, D.C. to decry the bonus payouts.
It's not fair to all the working people here who struggle daily for health care, income, pay their rent, pay their bills.
Being paid $15,000 an hour compared to your workers' hours at $8 or $10 or even $15, where's the justice in that? There is no justice in being paid that much more.
This bailout money is from the government, it's taxpayers' money, and it should be spread out to the people who needs it.
Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner, meanwhile, has admitted his staff asked Senator Christopher Dodd to insert a provision in the economic stimulus bill that allowed AIG to hand out the $165 million in bonuses. Geithner made the admission in an interview with CNN.
We expressed concern about this specific provision because we wanted to make sure it was strong enough to survive legal challenge. But we also work with him to strengthen the overall framework. And his bill has this very important provision we're relying on now to go back and see if we can recoup payments that were made that there was no legal ability to block.
The New York Times reports Senator Dodd is drawing outrage from constituents in his home state of Connecticut for his role in the AIG bonuses controversy. Dodd has come under scrutiny for admitting he was asked by the Treasury to include the bonus protection provision in the stimulus bill after initially claiming he didn't know how it got inserted. As AIG faces the loss of its bonuses, it's quietly filed a lawsuit to recoup more than $300 million in what it says are overpaid taxes. The company says it overpaid the government in charges for using offshore tax havens. The suit effectively means AIG is using U.S. taxpayer money to sue its majority owner, the U.S. taxpayer. The government owns an 80% stake in AIG following its $170 billion bailout. Meanwhile, a top Obama administration's official is coming under scrutiny for his ties to AIG. Richard Holbrooke, the U.S. Special Envoy to Pakistan and Afghanistan, served on AIG's board from 2001 until early last year. Holbrooke is believed to have collected up to $800,000 during his AIG stint. In other bailout news, a congressional probe has found the top 13 firms to receive bailout money owe more than $220 million in unpaid federal taxes. Congressmember John Lewis of Georgia, the chair of the House Ways and Means Subcommittee on Oversight, says 2 of the companies owe more than $100 million apiece. The review only looked at the top 23 bailout recipients, leaving open the possibility of further owed taxes from nearly 450 remaining companies. The Inspector General overseeing the federal bailout says he will investigate whether recipient companies misled Congress on their tax obligations. The bailed-out financial giant Citigroup, meanwhile, is coming under scrutiny for a $10 million plan to build new offices for top executives. Citigroup has received $45 billion under the taxpayer-funded bailout. The Treasury Department is set to provide up to $5 billion in financing to auto parts suppliers. The money will come through the government's Troubled Assets Relief Program, or TARP. Auto parts suppliers have asked for up to $25 billion amidst the auto industry decline. President Obama continued his criticism of AIG Thursday on the second day of his trip to California. Appearing on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, Obama said the AIG case exemplifies Wall Street excesses.
The immediate bonuses that went to AIG are a problem, but the larger problem is we've got to get back to an attitude where people know enough is enough, and people have a sense of responsibility, and they understand that their actions are going to have an impact on everybody. And if we can get back to those values that built America, then I think we're going to be okay.
Obama's appearance marked the first ever by a sitting U.S. president on a late-night talk show. He was later forced to backtrack after appearing to make fun of the disabled and joking about his bowling abilities. After Leno complimented him for a low bowling score, Obama said, quote, "It's like the Special Olympics or something." In a statement, the White House said Obama didn't intend to disparage the Special Olympics. President Obama, meanwhile, has released a videotaped appeal to the people of Iran. In a message timed to coincide with the Iranian holiday of Nowruz, Obama said he's prepared to meet with Iranian leaders.
My administration is now committed to diplomacy that addresses the full range of issues before us and to pursuing constructive ties among the United States, Iran, and the international community. This process will not be advanced by threats. We seek instead engagement that is honest and grounded in mutual respect.
Iranian officials reacted to the tape by renewing calls for the U.S. to address Iranian grievances, including the 1953 coup that overthrew Iran's nationalist government. The Obama administration's drafting a plan to double Afghanistan's national security forces. According to the New York Times, senior administration officials say the U.S. is seeking a force of about 400,000 Afghan troops and police officers. In Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, several Israeli soldiers have provided new accounts of human rights violations during Israel's attack on the Gaza Strip. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz published testimony from soldiers recounting the firing on unarmed civilians and the intentional destruction of their property. The Israeli military says it'll investigate. We'll have more on this story right after headlines. The allegations come as a top UN human rights investigator has accused Israel of committing war crimes during the Gaza attack. In an annual report, Richard Falk, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian territories, said Israel appears to have violated the Geneva Convention's code requiring forces to distinguish between civilians and armed combatants. Falk's calling on the UN Security Council to establish an ad hoc criminal tribunal to investigate alleged war crimes in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel's arrested 10 Hamas officials in the occupied West Bank. Hamas is calling the move a blackmail attempt to pressure it for the release of the captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. Talks on a prisoner exchange broke down this week in part over an Israeli demand that hundreds of freed prisoners be arrested or deported upon their release. Israel seized and jailed some 40 elected Hamas lawmakers since Shalit's capture in June of 2006. A former Bush administration official says the U.S. has continued to jail many Guantanamo Bay prisoners seized in Afghanistan despite knowing of their innocence. In an interview with the Associated Press, Lawrence Wilkerson, the former chief of staff to the then Secretary of State, Colin Powell, said the U.S. held on to the innocent prisoners in the hopes they could one day provide helpful intelligence. Describing the Bush administration mentality, Wilkerson said, quote, "It did not matter if a detainee were innocent. Indeed, because he lived in Afghanistan and was captured on or near the battle area, he must know something of importance," unquote. Wilkerson continued, "We need to put those people in a high-security prison like the one in Colorado, forget them, and throw away the key. We can't try them because we tortured them and didn't keep an evidence trail." Wilkerson says former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld and Vice President Dick Cheney fought efforts to improve vetting of Afghan prisoners. The Pentagon contractor CACI has lost a bid to dismiss a torture lawsuit brought by the 4 former Abu Ghraib prisoners. On Thursday, a federal judge made public a ruling rejecting Kaki's claim to be immune from prosecution. The case also names the company L3 Services, as well as 3 individual contractors. One of the plaintiffs, an Iraqi farmer, alleges he was caged, beaten, threatened with dogs, and given electric shocks during more than 4 years in U.S. detention.